Good evening, and welcome everyone to our session this evening on sustainability goal setting for firms. For those who maybe haven't been to many of our sessions, we started this back at the end of 2019, back when we were meeting live, which we hope to someday get back to in some format. But we started in 2019, and then in the spring of 2020 pivoted to remote sessions. These used to be local chapter meetings, and now they've kind of expanded into a farther reaching audience. We've had presenters from out of town, and we've covered, as you can see by this slide, quite a few topics over the last 2.5 years or so. And most of these, at least all of them since we went remote, are recorded and available on our AIA Philly COTE webpage. So certainly, put those out there as a great resource for diving deeper into some of these topics. And then on the heels of the last 2 years, we've decided to kind of take this year's sessions to take deeper dives, maybe kind of reset and kind of look at everything again. Having gone through all of these the last 2 years in many ways, but looking at all the topics we've looked at. And so we decided to start off this year with a 3-part series on sustainability goals. And our March presentation was more of a presentation by Rob Fleming to kind of set the tone for how to set goals, and sustainability goals in particular on projects, and how to consider a sustainable design process. Our April session was about sustainability goal setting on projects and setting those goals, and then this evening's session is focused on sustainability goal setting for firms. And so we're going to focus on that this evening, including looking at sustainability action plans. So with that, I'm going to continue. So this all started, as in part as an effort to encourage people to join the AIA 2030 commitment. The AIA's initiative to get all of our member firms to carbon neutral by the year 2020. So as we've talked about often, there are a lot of myths about the effort involved, but really the hardest part is probably to get started. And once you do get started, you can sign up, get a project into the database pretty quickly, and start to look at your portfolio and kind of learn how you're doing and learn where you need to go in terms of your progress towards carbon neutral. And as we've shown before too, the first step is to kind of make that commitment to working towards carbon neutral by the year 2030. And this evening, we're going to focus on the second step here, creating sustainability plan, and how that can be used as an opportunity to kind of transform your process, adapt your process towards more sustainable work. And then as you kind of move through the process of reporting your projects to your portfolio to the 2030 commitment, you get a better sense of where your targets are and where they should be. And then you have an opportunity to feed that information back into your process, and at the same time, update your sustainability action plan. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in some of the breakout sessions this evening. So just a couple of notes up front, logistics. Use the Google link in the chat to provide your name, your AIA number, and confirm your attendance. Also, feel free to drop questions into the chat as we go. Now we are going to have breakout sessions, and those are meant to be discussion sessions as well. But when we come back from those, we're going to have a little reporting out and certainly opportunities for more questions and discussion as a group. And then just a note to all those who are on, we are recording, so we can have these sessions available later. So as I mentioned, tonight's session is focused around crafting smart sustainability goals. We've used the acronym SMART, which I'll explain in a moment, as a way to kind of help us define how to set goals that are effective towards reaching more sustainable, towards achieving more sustainable work. So, and this follows on last month's, as I mentioned, which focused on the project approach. So this evening, we're going to look at how to set goals, firm-wide. And one of the things we'll talk about, I think in our sessions, is what are the right types of goals for different types of firms. There's, as we'll talk about, no two firms are alike, and you do different work, you're different sizes, and have different goals. So we'll also focus on we'll discuss on the importance of measuring your progress towards these goals. A very important piece of kind of verifying your performance. And we'll share some additional resources as well that we'll talk about in our presentation and then in our breakout discussion. So as mentioned, the way this is set up is after our intro here, we will break out into workshop groups by firm size. That's how we've decided to break it down, as we thought that was a reasonable way to kind of identify different objectives that different types of firms may have. So to that end, if you would like to enter into the chat, or John Key, I'm not sure if you provided a survey, which workshop you'd like to join when we break in a few minutes, please let us know. And John Key will be available to help move people into those groups too.
So we're just going to open up the breakout room so that you can choose which breakout room you want to go to. So there'll be a pop-up on your screen and you can just select which breakout room to go to. There'll be like a little button to say, go to this room.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'll be around to help anyone move anyone over if you can't.
Anyone gets lost.
Yep.
All right. So going back to the first presentation that Rob Fleming gave, he used an analogy of the elephant, the rider, and the path. And really what we're focused on here is we're trying to shape the path. We're trying to guide the elephant, which is maybe our process, or maybe it's the whole team, down a path that kind of intentionally achieves sustainability, achieves more successfully towards sustainability. And we know that, and part of shaping this path is really learning how to use goal setting as an exercise to shape that path, to assess your values, your work, and the opportunities in front of you. And so we use this acronym SMART, and just we identified this this acronym. It's out there. There's a lot of sustainability sites out there that promote this. But SMART, what are good goals? First of all, they should be specific. They should be well defined, and identify who is going to pursue them, and where and why. They should also be measurable. Like as we mentioned, it's important to be able to measure your progress towards your goals. And the achievable. I mean, we should identify goals that we can attain and then we can achieve. But I think in our discussions, we've also thought, well, this is an opportunity to maybe be a little more aggressive, which is, I guess, another A, but be aspirational, ambitious. But at the end of the day, they have to be actionable. And then relevant is a really important thing. You have to align your goals with objectives of your project requirements, your clients' requirements, and really the way your firm works in this context. And then lastly, the T for time bound, setting goals that you can evaluate within a finite period of time, so that they're not open-ended and never get resolved. So, just, finishing up our recap of the initial presentation, how do we get to these SMART goals? How do we develop these SMART goals? That's a different process maybe for each firm, but it involves, having values and goals, conversations, identifying those guiding principles that really drive those goals. Very importantly, finding strategies that will identifying strategies that will help you reach those goals, and aligning your whole team moving forward so that everybody has been a part of that goal setting effort and is working together towards those goals. And as mentioned, benchmarking, setting targets, and measuring your goals is of critical importance. So tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to break out into some sessions and talk about the how to create a sustainability action plan. And we're going to hear from in the breakout sessions from firm representatives of firms that have had long-standing sustainability action plans that maybe that they've updated a couple of times, some that have newer plans and are revising, and then some that are actually still developing plans, newer to signing on to the 2030 commitment. But the underlying importance that I want to emphasize here about the importance of making this plan, and we're going to be focusing on a document that the AIA has put out about creating a sustainability action plan that works towards the 2030 challenge. What I really want to focus on is that it's an opportunity for firms to look introspectively at their values, their aspirations, and it's an opportunity to kind of consider a holistic and firm-wide approach and identify goals and metrics towards those improvements. And I think one thing that is important to emphasize is the more you think about your process and more thought you put into establishing the right process for your firm, I think the easier it'll be for you to follow that and stay on that path. And as I say at the bottom of the slide here, the plan helps set the path, going back to the elephant analogy. So, I think one of the things that this guide emphasizes is that developing a more sustainable process, does often involve adapting or changing, making changes to the process in your firm. And as we talked about, there's no one size fits all. Every firm has a different way of working. I think even when you're in different firms, different people like to work a little bit differently, and I think it's important to not constrain people, but to provide them a path towards getting on a more sustainable track. So consider your firm's values and processes, and try and work to enhance them across your work here. So, and importantly, start out by setting goals and targets. The AIA 2030 commitment and the DDX is a great way to set some initial goals with very little project information. And then look at specific to your project and to your firm, your process, what strategies and tools would be right for your firm, would be right for this project. And then again, another thing that the 2030, the DDX helps you do is measure your progress, track your data. And then there's other measuring systems that you can use here to evaluate your performance. And importantly, your sustainability action plan should not sit on the shelf once you've written it. It should evolve and grow. I think as your process improves, as your process evolves, I think you'll find yourselves wanting to look at next step, adjustments, and as the opportunities arise, take those next steps. So, and then importantly, another aspect of this is to share knowledge and engage your whole office, both at all levels, and engage your clients as well, and get everybody working together on the same page. So we're not going to go through the guide in detail, but I'll put a link up for that in the presentation in a moment. But what are the key elements of a sustainability action plan? So, first of all, as we talked about, it's making the commitment, identifying your philosophy or your values, and then design and approach, setting milestones, setting goals, setting specific design goals for your process, and then looking at, when you look at goal setting and evaluation, when you'll measure, how, and as well as who will be responsible for reporting, and the 2030 commitment reporting happens every year, and that's a great opportunity, but certainly we can look at our data more often than that as appropriate and get that feedback. And then, as we mentioned, both building up the literacy within your firm in terms of educating on sustainability and learning from each other, and also reaching out to your clients, to your peers, as we're hoping to do tonight. And then the other element of the sustainability action plan is taking a look at how your firm operates, and what is your firm's carbon footprint? Are you, how do people get to work? What is your waste stream look like? All questions that are part of the holistic objective of setting a sustainability action plan. And as I mentioned, and we'll make this presentation available again on video, but this document that I'm referring to, the sustainability action plan that works. Last month in our sustainability goals for projects presentation and breakout sessions, we focused on the framework for design excellence, which is also a great place to kind of find those questions that might help inform your process. And we focused in depth on different measures within that framework last month. And the COTE super spreadsheet we talked about, which is kind of a piece of the framework for design excellence. We talked about how you might be able to measure your progress towards certain goals. There's a lot of calculators, there's a lot of tables built into that super spreadsheet, whether or not you're pursuing a COTE Top 10 award that you can use to evaluate different aspects of your process, whether it's water, energy, etc. And then lastly, I did want to put up here a link to basically a repository of all the action plans that are posted on the AIA 2030 website, which is, I think there's something close to 300 plans. Probably don't want to read them all, but it's good to know that they're there, and you might be able to find some guidance in looking at some of your peer firms. So with that, I think, Jonky, we're ready to break out into our groups. And I do want to, before we do that, I do want to introduce who our facilitators will be. We have Paul Thompson with Blue Path, and we have he'll be helping facilitate the small firm group. We have Bunny Tucker and Danielle Fleischman from Digsaw, our medium-sized facilitators and firm facilitators, and then Brian Smiley and Jonathan Weiss, who will be facilitating our large firm rooms. So again, thanks to all our facilitators for graciously volunteering to lead these discussions. And I think with that, Jonky's going to put up a prompt to help you pick which session you want to jump into, and we'll meet up on the backside.
Okay, and so the timer started. It's a 30-minute breakout room, so join quickly.
Okay. Junkie, is there a link that I should be?
I can push you in there if you're not seeing it
Sure.
because you're sharing.
I think because
You
I'm
could also
sharing.
not, yeah, you can probably stop sharing too if you wanted to.
Okay.
And I'll assign you to the small firms group.
Sounds good.
All right. There you go. Welcome back all. I hope that wasn't too of an abrupt end.
Doesn't matter how much notice we get, someone always gets interrupted. But it was 4 minutes was a good warning.
Okay.
Right. I think we have
So-
everyone back. Yep.
Looks like we've got everybody. So how do we want to start reporting back out? Should we start with the small? Is that Shabay? I see you up on the screen.
We had a lot of good conversations, and we started about with Paul at Blue Path. Your firm is a 2%, 2.5, and we talk about different sizes of the firms. We have experience from like sole practitioner, like Janki, or a little larger from 15, 20% with Sarah, and we were mentioning a lot about the length of the sustainability plan, and it ranged from 1 page to 50 pages, and the one Sarah's working on is around like 10 pages, and your firm trying to keep it short. And a lot of the need for small firm to do sustainability plan we mentioned were to reach out to peer firms or reach out to clients and have a market focused on how to do that. And we also recognize that might be a challenge because a lot of people in the firms are wearing many hats because it's small, and when you're trying to do a lot of things, then doesn't mean that you have to do it when it's a obvious business need, or how do you carve out the time to make the plan, and to rather keep it simple or have it very specific. And as Josh mentioned, a lot of communications happen in a larger in a larger firm, has to do with communications within your colleagues. But for a small firm, it's mostly communicating outwards and doing outreach, like we previously said, and attract similar-minded clients. And Sarah's also mentioning some experience with her plan writings, which is starting with the firm's values and to document what you already done in the firm and what you can do, and push a little bit for what you can do in the future. And all the group member jumping in and saying, okay, so do we do business as usual, or do we take some risk and include more people in these conversations, like engaging younger and diverse workforce, and taking new technology like measuring the energy, doing energy modeling, such and such, and documenting carbon uses, and how to engage all those new technology into the new workflow. Also, Josh was mentioning social justice and engaging people in the community, and recognizing that's a challenge for small firm. Then we'll still have challenge of continuing educations and all the different unique thing in the small firms community. Yeah, we went on a lot of topics. So yeah, that's about it.
Paul, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add there. I mean, I think that was a very,
Yeah, I
very
guess.
complete rundown of our conversation. I'd be interested to hear what similarities and differences came up in the medium and the large. So did someone get selected to report out on the medium size group?
No, do we have any volunteers?
I don't know, you want to take it, Bunny?
I can do it.
Yeah, go for it,
Allison, thank
Allison.
you. Perfect.
Great.
We touched on a lot of similar things, like trying to benchmark what your firm does already, and how to initiate the plan, and how important it is to have a partner on board, and a selling point for moving it along could be the marketing aspect, and how important it can be to clients, and promotion. And then we looked at Digsaw's approach to this sustainability action plan and how they're implementing it, what they do within their firm, in terms of internal education, and then also how they incorporate it into their design process. And they have a committee within their office, and then they also have sustainability champs that are on each of the design teams. So the champs meet with the sustainability committee, and then they can spread the knowledge throughout the office, which is important in implementing it. And then we also, in their case study, looked at the iterative designs and how they use Climate Studio as a modeling tool to see how they're doing and really check if they're staying on track with their goals. And I think that was a lot of it. I might be missing something. Anyone else can chime in?
Well, that was great. Thank you, Allison. I think a point that Shabay made too is that, starting with what you're already doing is a really helpful jumping off point. If you're writing your sustainability action plan for the first time, I think Sherman reiterated the same thing in our group, and identifying where you are, where you want to go, and what the small steps are along the way is just a really helpful process.
Actually, another thing that was helpful to hear in seeing the case study is that getting to these points takes a long time. So it might feel like it might be a slow process, and that's okay, but you'll get there.
Well, I think oftentimes one of the hardest things is to get started and to start that conversation. And I think that starting to build that momentum is essential to kind of taking those next steps. I know we have that same discussion internally, and I think probably I've worked in different size firms, and I think it's the same thing. And then as we were talking about, how do you find the time? How big do you need to be to set aside dedicated resources of time or people to doing that? So Brian, maybe now would be a good time to bring the. I mean, I know I work at a big firm, but you work at a really big firm. So, but with you have a small office too. So I imagine the dynamic varies, and same with Jonathan. But love to hear from your group.
Yeah, and I'm happy to sort of report out here. And I actually.
You went on mute, Brian.
I muted myself. I meant to share and went muted. So, all right, sorry. I'd like to just share some graphics here if I could. But one thing I was going to say before jumping into this is, to Josh's point, just starting from a template, a firm that essentially maybe has similar values to your own or similar scale, or just use their action plan, and that's the great starting point, that you have all these points that you'll be addressing in the conversation. So it's really figuring out what you need to talk about is not the difficult thing. Sort of figuring out how you want to respond for your particular firm, that's where the discussions will go on. So I'll just thumb through, and one thing I'll say is that the sustainability action plan should be an evolving document. You should update it occasionally, but not every year. You should be reporting your projects. That should be the focal point. So HOK was a signatory very early on, and started reporting their projects in 2011. So this is our 2016 version of our action plan, and I'll actually flip to some of the updates we've made since then that I didn't have in this particular version, but just giving you a rough framework for what our sustainability action plan and how we bake that into our processes for our projects. So, the first part of the sustainability action plan, this is 42 pages, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll thumb through, the first part just basically talks about what the 2030 commitment is, because you might have an audience of people at your firm that don't know what it is. So, you want to talk about goal setting right off the bat. And, one of the goals should be essentially doing great design, that you're not, ignoring that, but also getting feedback from various sources and analyses. So as I mentioned before, setting the goals was really critical. And I will say the one thing, this is where I'll flip to our PowerPoint here, is this diagram here, the HOK 6 steps, was one of the biggest outcomes from our sustainability action plan, that we wanted to create this 6-step iterative process that gets into the feedback loops of, after a project is complete, and talking to owners. As I'd mentioned, that's one of the biggest challenges for architects, but really going through these steps for every project, starting with the analysis of place, so you can inform orientation and massing right off the bat, is really critical, and then getting into the more detailed analysis. But the key thing about the detailed analysis is actually allocating time for the staff to work on it. So HOK has a mandate that any fees over $300,000, you must engage the sustainability design expert and allocate minimum 5 working days for them to do fundamental analyses. And that's really critical. And one other thing I will say is that as we've evolved, this is something that was released last year. It's the sustainability responsibility matrix, basically who does what at what stage of the project. And we have various checklists and safeguards, we'll say, but always the project designer, project architect, and project manager have a responsibility to the project, the principal in charge, and the rest of the firm, the board of directors, essentially, to hit our sustainability targets. And if you're not doing that, then basically it will be reflected in your reporting. But so, for example, this is like a smart Adobe tool where you sort of click on these. I've made it static for PowerPoint, but at the very beginning marketing stage, who's responsible? The marketing principal. What do they have to do, and how are they going to do it? And there's little detailed bubbles that goes through that, and you sort of click through concept design, where it will sort of float what the project manager is doing. Essentially, that's sort of one of the prime movers. The project manager needs to make sure that there's an allocation, that sustainability person is in the work plan. So that's essentially it. We have other more detailed checklists. Again, it seems a little dry, but very important nonetheless. But we've also started to evolve this into aspects of regenerative design requirements. So it's beyond energy, and also embodied carbon too. And so I won't go into all that detail. I'll sort of just go back quickly. Modeling is really key. A lot of folks have seen me highlight this article that HOK was involved with about how modeling pays back. 2030 commitment reporting. Modeling is really key to that, because otherwise you're using default values, and it really does pay back. So do a search about how modeling has a short payback period, and you can help convince your clients to have that fee allocated. So you can do iterative modeling. You're not just doing it at the end of CDs. So again, this is the older one. It just sort of goes through who does what back in 2016, but that matrix now has evolved it. And one other thing I want to highlight is we also do a mid-year gut check, mid-year reporting in Q3 that I highly encourage firms of all scales to do. Again, you're enabling the project teams. You'll have a sustainability champion. You'll have the support of the sustainability director for the particular office. That they're not there touching every project or there on a day-to-day basis. You basically need this mid-year gut check so things don't get too far without having attention paid to it. And then we have our final end-of-year reporting where the different firms or different offices rather within HOK are basically having a friendly competition between themselves. So that's it. And with for HOK, it's sustainability is every project, every team member, every time.
So that actually, listening to everyone talk, I have a question that came up actually during the small group session that we were in. And one of the things was like, obviously there's a lot of players at HOK who can help develop this. But what intrigued me, and the question I would pose to anyone who's on here is on the call today, is that how much of, I guess like for HOK, you go through a couple of projects and you learn from it, and then that helps you develop your goals. But how much of the fear of adoption, because we talked a little bit about mindsets where smaller firms or mid-sized firms, where just if you don't have a partner involved, there might be a fear of changing the way you do things. So how much of that plays a role in an individual firm's ability to actually go ahead and say, I'm going to just develop the sustainability action plan without having gone through it before? I don't know if it was like a very clear question, but it's just a point of discussion.
One thing I would say, and this is actually something we talked about in the large group, and this might help assist that, is that it's actually a part of the AIA's Code of Ethics to talk about sustainability. And Brian might be able to elaborate on that a little bit more, but that might give you some leverage as to why you should be doing it or like changing it if you don't have the support you need.
Donkey, you're smirking because you've been in a presentation with me where I busted out the AIA ethical guidelines, and everybody's probably ready to fall asleep. They're like, why is he reading the guidelines? But as I mentioned, I became aware of it and really, I would say, enamored with the guidelines that point out that it's every architect, every AIA member's responsibility to raise sustainability, whether the client asks for it or not. So you really need to be advancing it. And if the client doesn't want to do it, that's fine, but you definitely don't want them to come to you years later and say, how come you never talked to me about sustainability? This other architect I work with, talked about it right off the bat or made some compelling arguments. So yeah, that's, I think aspirationally, you really need to work your way up to that. So there's that aspect. Jonky, I think you were talking a little bit about, overcoming obstacles too, or maybe trying to write a plan without having gone through the process yet. And that.
Yeah, especially because when we're starting to deal with measurable goals, like how do you know what you need to measure if you haven't been, right? Like, I guess it kind of goes back to what Bunny had, or the medium-sized group mentioned, benchmarking what you're already doing. But what came to mind was, what if you're not doing it yet? And this is just really for the really, really small firms that might not be engaging with this yet. And Tyler's written in the chat box at VMA, we use money and prestige as the motivator. Yeah.
I'm going to add something, if I can. I'm going to add something. I don't come from a small firm, as you know, but I'm going to say that I think part of the thing that we talked about in our large firm group a little bit as well was you have to start from where you are, and that if you have to start from where your firm is. And so if the partners aren't supportive or the company isn't supportive, you need to sort of, and the money and prestige thing makes a lot of sense, but you need to start by saying there's a limited amount you can do. And everyone had, like, every firm in the, in the world has room for improvement. The ones that have not done anything and the ones that have done more than anyone else we know, there's room for improvement. So the goal is really to sort of, you have to get, if you don't have the answer for the target, the plan needs to be about the process. So one of the things that we saw and we talked about is that, the goal should be that the sustainability tasks that your firm is willing to take on become tasks for the projects, not a job for the sustainability champion to come, what was the phrase you used, Brian, to come sprinkle some sustainability on at the end of the project, but needs to become integral, that it's like, that's how we do things. So, and every firm, I would say, when we signed on to the 2030 commitment, which was back in 2009, it was a huge firm with still the same fears about how do we set a target when we don't know yet where we are. And the answer is the first target is that you're going to do stuff and that you're going to revisit it when you know more about what targets you can set to push yourself beyond business as usual. So that was, I think that I feel like is pretty important.
Really great answer, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Hit all the points.
And the other thing I'm just gonna add is that, I feel like I've, just my own personal, therapy session here, that thank you for helping me with this, that I think a lot of times that we on the sort of sustainability side feel like, we're pushing a big rock up a small hill, but I think we need to remember this 2030 commitment is a company commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And you want your company, we're here to help the company do what they said they're going to do, and the accountability needs to go to the company. So if you're feeling sort of like you're not getting enough done, you need to sort of regroup around it and say, what is it that I can make this company aware of and help them? So,
Yeah, I think that's
go team.
That's one of the opportunities that the 2030 commitment provides. The first thing, like you said, you may not know where you are, but maybe your first goal is to measure, and then you can say where you are. And we've used that in our internal discussions to say, okay, well, this is where we're measuring. This is where we want to be. Sometimes we're getting there, sometimes we're not. How do we close that gap, and how do we do it consistently? I think that the big word we're discussing right now is consistency. Because there are very successful efforts going on, but then then there's others that fall short. And how do we communicate that across the firm, and how do we kind of share those experiences, across the firm, across your peers, depending on the size of your firm. So, I think obviously we kind of see the scale of HOK has a very kind of organized and focused process. I mean, it was really fantastic, and I've seen that 6 steps diagram before, but I think on the other end of the spectrum, as a small firm, where do you start, and how do you adopt these values, and really, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to having those conversations, and yeah, I mean, assessing where you are, if you're already doing some things, you'll find some successes, and then you'll see where you fall short, and I think that can inform the next step.
A lot of these examples, like we talked about having a working group or sustainability lead at the firm, but even if the firm is not there yet, talking to your peers, there's power in numbers. Peer pressure is real. It's impossible to ignore an entire firm if you're 5 people or 50 people. I don't know if it really applies to a large firm, but it's a really powerful process to have a large number of staff feel strongly about something, not just from a management perspective, but also just from design decisions on your project. They're inherently trying to detail and build and design better projects every day as you're learning and you're prioritizing this information that you're putting in the plan. definitely the larger firm too. Thanks, John.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Danielle. Like, the more people you can have asking the right questions through the design process, the closer you're going to get toward achieving those targets. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to be an expert in how to get there. Sustainability is such a broad, vast topic. Like, everything, no one's an expert on like every single aspect of the framework for design excellence. Like, we got new embodied carbon information coming our way every day. But if you can get everyone asking those questions, we are experts in like figuring out how to do things. And when you have that engagement, it's really powerful. And you can then like work through a project to get it to the place that you're aiming for.
I think one of the questions came up during our group discussion is how big the firm need to be to have a sustainable or sustainability plan or sustainability staff. After listening to all of your comment, I feel like the question is, it probably doesn't matter as much as we initially thought it would be, because in a small firm, you have the flexibility to quickly adopt something if you just have a conversation over lunch for 3 people and you all agree that, okay, we're gonna do embodied carbon, that's what we're gonna do. And for a big firm, you have the advantage of having more staff working on a very elaborate plan, and that's also the big firm advantage. So maybe is how to maybe I want to raise a question of how to get more people to become early adopters and to work against like business risk of being an early adopter, because it might comes with investment that doesn't have a very good marketing outcome or doesn't really translate to more client or more work kind of things. Wonder what's your thought on that, because that's a general question on my end.
I don't know who wants to jump into that. I mean, I think as you highlighted, every firm probably has their own way that they should structure it. But I will say, if you're passionate about it, as Bunny was saying, get that group of people together, small, medium, chances are at large, you probably already have a group of motivated people. But truthfully, at my last firm, that's how I started, just getting passionate people together and talking about these issues. When it came to HOK, as Janki said, HOK Philadelphia's office is smaller, and there wasn't really somebody driving local issues. So when I joined, I just jumped right into it, but with the resources of a much larger firm that was fantastic to have. But absolutely pull in those people, because you're right, you'll be hard to ignore. And I think it was Tyler, you were saying that Muddy and Prestige are motivators, but you don't want to have your principals don't want to walk into an interview unprepared to talk about sustainability. So by doing the minimum possible, they're really putting them at risk when a previous firm that just interviewed was able to hit it with authority or brought a sustainability person in that could speak to how the firm does things. To not address it can be dangerous. So understand that other firms are absolutely fluent in this and talking about it. So that should be a motivator.
Absolutely. And to also jump off of your point, the way that we did it at VMA as well was, a small group of us over lunch one day, we're just kind of like, this is super important. And then we started kind of talking about it and getting the ball rolling, and we gave a presentation to the partners and essentially to the entire staff. And we have a sustainability coordinator who kind of took the momentum from that presentation and, really launched us into this 2030 conversation. So, and I think it started with just myself and our sustainability coordinator kind of chatting over lunch and really just trying to get the momentum started. And I'm sure there were things beforehand that the partners had discussed and whatnot, but as early as I remember in this process was just kind of a conversation that snowballed.
Yeah, I will also say different firms, maybe do a better job about internally highlighting some of their projects. And, everybody that I've worked, and we all know that architecture is a challenging profession and people have their heads down a lot, but it's also good to take a step back from time to time and find out what other people are working on. And so what I found, one of the things I did very early on at my previous firm was we organized Earth Day Pechakuchas, where we basically grabbed 10, 20 projects, whatever we felt, and had people go through them to the whole firm to find out what exciting stuff people were doing. So it became this really, really cool event. We used to do local organic food, for the lunch, and and then also talk about initiatives. We tried to like roll out an initiative for the office each year. I remember we talked about how many paper cups we had. We had like 17 Comcast towers. And we said that was unacceptable. So we're going to reusable mugs. We invested in the dishwashing machine. We got rid of the individual little mini moos and said we're going to milk and put the staff together to do that. So sort of involving an initiative like that. I mean, I'm a big fan of Earth Day every day, but having that milestone is really a good deadline for getting people, and again, engaged. I mean, I'm curious about what the other projects are at our, at the firm at the time. So I wanted to learn more about what was going on.
Well, thanks, Brian. And I'm realizing
you remember those days, right, Josh?
I do. Those sound very familiar to me. But and I think you made a great point too earlier in your comment about I think about the external pressures, and I think the moment that I see us being in at this point where it's coming back from from principals at interviews, and these conversations are happening with prospective clients, and they may be overtly asking about it in their RFPs, or it may be something that we want to bring up in the interview, but more and more all types of clients, corporate, college and university, there's an interest across the board amongst amongst the clients that we want to work for, frankly. And I think just like Paul, I know was talking about finding finding their clients who are interested in these issues. I think we're seeing at a different scale, but it's very much a part of the greater dialogue that's happening right now. And I think it's been a great discussion, but we are 2 minutes before the hour, so we should probably bring this home. I thank everybody for the great conversation. Jonky, I'm going to try to share again. Hopefully I'll share the right screen. Let's see if that works. Okay. Are folks seeing that? So just real quickly, thanks again, everybody, for joining the conversation. I guess we finished that. I will just put out a note that our next session, starting in June, will be focused on embodied carbon. I think that's in here somewhere. That's going to start with a presentation in June, and then two workshops. We've started discussing how those will be set up. I also wanted to let everyone know who may not be aware of the other activities of the AI Committee on the Environment, namely our monthly meeting on the third Thursday, I think it is, of the month. The link is posted up there. And we have several subcommittees, the 2030 Commitment Subcommittee, which is Jonky and I are co-leading, but also the Policy and Advocacy Group, Brian, Danielle, others, and Environmental Justice, Design Awards, Jonathan and Sherman have helped transform our awards process. And we have a very active zero waste group, but each of these groups meets once a week once a month, sorry, once a month. And
Policy works meets once a week.
You meet once a week. Okay. Of course you do. always taking it to the next level, right? That's great. And I think, let's see, is that the end of the slide deck? I think it may be. So I thank you all for great conversation. John Key, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we leave, but it was a very, very good conversation. I'm glad we had the opportunity to come back together as all three groups to kind of hear about those discussions. So thank you all again, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, John.
Thank